Welcome back to Reptiles and Research. So in today's video we're going to talk about how to look after a baby bearded dragon. A lot of what I'm going to recommend are from my own experience owning bearded dragons, but then working with them in stores, and I also interviewed Beardy Vet, the world's leading expert in bearded dragons, so a lot of my knowledge is also coming from him too. So you can be assured what I'm about to tell you is the correct information. So I think the first thing that we should tackle is tank size. Today's minimums to house a bearded dragon is a 4x2x2 vivarium, which is the equivalent to 120 gallons. Bearded dragons get quite big, so anything less really restricts how they can even move. Now these animals hold territories of hundreds of meters in the wild, so us giving them like 4 feet space isn't really that unreasonable. Ideally what you should do is strive to go bigger so your bearded dragon will really appreciate that space to run up and down. I've actually got a 7x2x2 on order for my bearded dragon, but as a minimum to start off, 4x2x2. Babies can go straight into the 4x2x2. 4x2x2 of space isn't really that much whatsoever. I mean, in the wild, they are in the wild. They have endless space in every direction around them, so you don't have to worry about them getting lost in there or anything like that. Baby straight into a 4x2x2 is absolutely fine. I have worked in reptile stores for years and I've always just sold baby bearded dragons straight into a 4x2x2. And my friend who owns a reptile store recently sold a baby bearded dragon straight to a 5x2x2. So me recommending to you 4x2x2 is just our European normal standard. I understand Americans sometimes might have a different perspective, but truly they can go straight into a 4x2x2. You don't need to get like silly little glass tanks. Straight into a 4x2x2. You can buy your first 4x2x2 for as little as $299, and then you can just do that just once for that entire bearded dragon's life, rather than going and buying some starter kit for a baby bearded dragon for like $260, but then having to go and buy the 4x2x2 for the extra $300 later on anyway. It doesn't make sense to pay twice. Just get your 4x2x2 straight away. I know it's so tempting when you really want that dragon. Maybe you're a little bit younger and like you're begging your parents for that bearded dragon, and as a part of us that goes, yeah, you can get away with that. Yeah, that would be fine, because there's a part of us that just really wants the dragon, and we're trying to convince ourselves that like it's fine and it's a good move. But trust me, it's never a good move. It's better to be reserved and just hold back. Because what happens later on is we realise, hey, this bearded dragon's got a bit big now, and I think it really does need some more space, but actually I haven't got any money right now, so I need to save for a little bit. And then in that time that you're saving, the animal's suffering. Rather, if we do it in the reverse and we just save straight away and we get the appropriately sized enclosure straight away, and there was no animal there to suffer, we just did it the right thing straight away. So my advice would be save up, get the right size to begin with. Not only is it better for the bearded dragon, but it's better for your wallet. Now that we know what space our baby bearded dragon is going to need, we need to know that we need to heat them. So these animals are cold-blooded. They don't maintain their internal body temperature like us mammals do, so they need external heat, normally from the sun. So what we want to do is trying to simulate certain elements of the sun, and this is where heat bulbs come in. So heat lamps work by heating a filament in the center of the bulb, so that filament gets nice and hot, and then it radiates energy in the form of visible light and infrared. These bulbs come in different wattages, and the higher the wattage, obviously the more power that goes into it, the more intense the radiation of the bulb we get. Now the wattage of bulb that we should select for is sometimes situational, but for a 4x2x2, I'd probably recommend something like a 75 to 100 watt bulb. You want to place this at one end of the enclosure, so we have like a little patch of like warmth and sunlight, and a little patch of like cooler area and shade, just like in nature. Now beneath where you've got your heat lamp, you want to have a nice basking rock. Just a nice rock that's comfortable for your bearded dragon to lie on to warm up. This rock will get warm and it'll be the perfect spot for your baby bearded dragon to come and sit and bask. So the entire area underneath your basking light is called the basking zone. It's largely recommended at the moment that the surface temperature of the rock beneath your bulb should be around 40 to 42 degrees Celsius, or that's 104 to 107 Fahrenheit. These surface temperatures are a rough approximation as a proxy for the intensity of the rays coming from the bulb, in the hopes that it is strong enough to warm your baby bearded dragon to its ideal core temperature of 36.3 degrees Celsius or 97.34 Fahrenheit. But the really simple way of doing it is to watch your bearded dragon and watch how your baby bearded dragon basks and actually uses the basking zone. So they shouldn't really bask all day long, sat underneath their basking light. If that's happening, it's probably telling you that they can't get their ideal body temperature up and that they're trying, but they're not achieving their ideal core temperature. What they should be doing is coming to our basking spot in the morning, having a bit of a bask for a little while, getting nice and warm, warming up for the day, going about in their enclosure, doing bearded dragon things, and in the afternoon they come back for a similar time, little bask in the afternoon to warm up before the rest of the day continues. They shouldn't be sat there all day because that's showing that they're not warming up. Similarly, they shouldn't be avoiding the basking spot all day. If they're avoiding the basking spot all day, it's showing that either the air temperature is too warm and it's telling them they don't need to bask, or that the basking spot is just too intense for them. So what I would do is start with your 75 watt. If your bearded dragon's basking all day long, then it's probably not intense enough. Then you can go up to a 100 watt bulb and assess from there. If your bearded dragon's avoiding the basking spot and it's too intense for them, you can go from that 100 watt down to 75 watt. You have to play it by ear and really adapt to the bearded dragon's behaviour. If you watch and listen and learn, they will tell you what they need. The safe distance that you should have the basking spot and where your bearded dragon can get to from the heat lamp is around 12 inches. I would also strongly recommend we use a dimming thermostat to control our heat lamp. This protects against overheating the enclosure and also protects against fires. Now, I have an entire thermostat guide on this channel, so if you want to learn more about that, go ahead and watch that video. The air temperature in the enclosure can be anywhere from 20 degrees to 30 degrees Celsius. You want to use thermometers to measure this. You want a digital thermometer to actually measure the air temperature. You want to place that away from the lights in the end that's shaded, because if you have lights coming down upon a thermometer, the warming of the lights is going to increase the reading from the thermometer, and it's not actually going to be a true reflection of that air temperature. So you want that in the cool end, measuring the air temperature in the enclosure, and then you want a surface temp gun, just like in the pandemic when we were measuring foreheads, one of those to measure surface temperatures in the enclosure. Just remember that the temperature of the air and the temperature of a surface in the enclosure are not one and the same. Let's move on to UVB. So bearded dragons need UVB to survive. They don't have the appropriate bile acids to digest vitamin D3 in the diet, so they must get it through making it in their skin under UVB light. They need it to make the appropriate vitamin D to be able to even absorb calcium properly. That is why it's essential. Without it, your bearded dragon can get sick or get metabolic bone disease or even die. So it's a big must. So in our 4x2x2, broadly speaking, a 12% or a 14% UVB linear bar should achieve this, but it depends upon if the bulb is above mesh or it's beneath mesh and the distance to the basking spot. So it's not as clear cut as many guides on the internet make it seem, but luckily enough I do have a video on this channel that talks about how to pick the exact bulb for your exact situation and for your exact dragon. So go watch that video, it'll teach you everything that you need to know. But broadly speaking, in this guide I would say avoid the coil UVB bulbs. They haven't got the big enough spread to cover your bearded dragon evenly, like the linear tubes can, and they're often not strong enough at the right distance either. Now you want to place your UVB bar as close to your basking light as possible. You want your UVB to cover 1/3 to half of your enclosure, so there is space away from the bulb for your bearded dragon to escape. Again, you want it to the far end with your basking light, so you have this little patch of sunshine and this little patch of shade. Very natural. Lastly, you want to really brighten up that enclosure, especially at the basking site. So bearded dragons have the third eye on top of their head, and that basically acts as a really primitive version of an eye, and it can really only detect like light and dark, but it's really good at helping them pick the brightest basking spot in nature to get the best basking position for them. Remember that all these rays and all these lamps in the wild are all just blended together from the sun. So naturally, the brighter the basking spot to a bearded dragon, that means the more UVB will be there, the better they'll be able to warm up. Like Brightness is a key indicator to these animals of the quality of the basking site, so we really want to make sure we do this for them in our homes. You can use LED spotlights like the Sansi bulbs that you can get from Amazon, and they can just screw straight into an E27 fitting or a dome. Or you can use the long UVB LED bars and do it very similar to like with the UVB, place them 1/3 to 1/2 the enclosure, give them that nice sunny spot and then that shaded area. But all of these bulbs and everything will be in our Amazon kit below, linked in the description. So once all these bulbs are clustered together at one end in our nice little basking zone, we've got our area of sunlight now. Now for a day-night cycle, broadly speaking, you can have it on for 12 hours on, 12 hours off. So say the lights come on at 8 AM but they go off at 8 PM. At night, you want to turn all your heat and lights off at night. They need it to be dark to go to sleep, just like us. And the cooling of the night temperatures is actually really good for their immune systems. Nighttime temperatures can be actually quite low in Australia. It can be as low as 5 degrees Celsius or 41 Fahrenheit in the wilds of Australia during springtime. So it's really important that we actually allow our temperatures to drop at night, and letting them drop to the low 60s at night is no problem whatsoever. In fact, one of the main reasons that they might not bask during the day is if their nighttime temperatures were too hot the night before. So having that ability to drop and allow their core body temperature to actually drop during the night really elicits that basking behavior from them and encourages them to bask in the morning. So they get all the health properties from basking as well. So this on and off cycle is really good for your bearded dragon's health. So you don't want any lights or any heat on at night. So turn all the heating off unless you live somewhere absolutely freezing, and if that's the case, then you can provide them some non-light emitting heat sources like a ceramic or a radiant heat panel or something. But for most of us, it won't get so cold, so you can use a timer plug on the wall. Again, better for their health and better for your wallet. So let's talk substrate. So bearded dragons evolved to live on a mix of sands and soils in the wild. So what you can do for your bearded dragon is give them a mixture of topsoils to play sands, or just sand, or any of these commercially available like desert sands. Or even you can buy the real stuff straight from Australia out of the habitats of bearded dragons and buy the actual real exported red sand. You can find a link to that down below as well. Substrate is really important for bearded dragons because it provides cushioning for their joints so they aren't stood on really hard ground all the time, but it also lets them dig, which I really value. Don't use reptile carpets or tile or lino. Like they get their claws cut and they can't really dig, and it's just not good for them. If you don't provide them with loose substrates, or at least giving them a digging box, then bearded dragons can actually lose muscle mass and it can be really hard on their joints. Now there is something called impaction, and it's when a really sick bearded dragon actually gets bits of insect skeleton and substrates and vegetable matter and anything else really clogged in their digestive system. If you're caring for your bearded dragon the way that I'm teaching you, substrate impaction won't really be an issue, but if you're still concerned, I have a whole video about the science behind it and what you need to be concerned about and what you just need to let go. So go ahead and watch that video if you want to learn more. Okay, so let's talk decorations. So bearded dragons like to hide under logs or in burrows. So provide them with hides or logs they can get in, on, under, behind. You get my drift. They are also semi-arboreal, which is a really fancy way of saying they actually just climb a lot. So be sure to provide them with lots of branches to climb on. They really enjoy having that like vantage point to look out everywhere. And it's also really just good exercise for them. This is really especially important for babies. So in the wild, babies often just sit up in a bush and they'll be like hugging this branch, but like in like a cluster of bushes. So they're like hidden. And they'll sit there and wait and they'll see like a bug like crawl across the floor, and they'll jump down, like swallow that bug and then get back into their position and hide again. At that size, baby bearded dragons are like a snack for everything else. So that behaviour is really prominent when they're babies. So provide them with like lots of twigs and branches or a really bushy plant to allow them to do that behaviour and just feel really secure as well. Now the more they age, bearded dragons really don't like having their views blocked. They like to see all around them and they like to see what's coming. Bearded dragons like to be able to watch the skies in the wild and watch for birds and see all around them to see like a snake coming or any other predator so they can see it and run. So make sure you leave some open space at the front just for them to have all the clutter at the back, but the space at the front for them to sit and look out towards the space. They don't really like having their view impeded in that way. It is a balancing act, and obviously the bigger the enclosure, the easier that becomes. So let's talk about water and humidity. So most of a bearded dragon's water comes from the food that it eats. Out in the wild, there's lots of greens and flowers for them to eat, but also lots of bugs as well. Obviously, it does actually rain in the wild, and bearded dragons will sit and allow the raindrops to collect on their head and run towards their mouth, and they'll sit and drink like that. Or there will be big puddles on the floor. They can drink from a puddle. Humidity in the wild is very cyclical and rises at night but then drops in the middle of the day. During the middle of the day, humidity can be as low as like 20%. Or at night it can go up to 70%. And in burrows it can be nearly 100% because they're underground and it's damp. Bearded dragons are actually fine with humidity. It's only when it's cold and wet that it becomes a problem. So in our homes, if it's really low in humidity and it's 20% during the day, that's fine. Or if it's 50% or it's 60%, that's fine. And if it rises at night, that is fine. It's just that natural cycle. I see a lot of beginners panicking on forums that are like, oh my god, it's 70% in my enclosure at night, what do I do? Like, it's absolutely fine. Unless your enclosure is actually physically wet and cold, you'll be fine. I mean, in this room right now, it's 70% humidity, but like everything around me is still bone dry. There is a difference between high relative humidity in the air and actual water and wetness. Is a big difference. So give them a water bowl, they'll drink from it if they want to, or you can just spray bits of the enclosure and just give them water to drink from, dripping off their nose. For those babies, you can also spray like a back wall, so they see like a water droplet running down a back wall and they go and drink it, or on the plants they're sitting on the leaves and stuff and they can drink from it that way. So let's go into diet. So baby bearded dragons grow way too fast in captivity, like ridiculously fast, and it causes them so many problems because we overfeed them too much. It should take a bearded dragon 2 whole years to get to adulthood. But yet people are getting them to adulthood in like 6 months. It's crazy. If people are feeding too much protein, it can lead to health problems like gout and other issues. People overfeeding their youngsters can cause like liver problems and liver failure. Growing them slowly is so much better for their health, but also you get to enjoy baby time and the baby phase for far longer. You only want to feed a baby bearded dragon around 5 prey items around the size of the gap between their eyes. And I don't mean like this way, I mean like that gap. So if the width of the actual insect fits between the eyes, around 5 of them a day. And then those babies, you can provide them with fresh vegetation every day. Once your baby bearded dragon gets to around 30 grams in total body weight, then you can take a step back and feed that every second day with a gap in between. You want to keep your baby bearded dragon lean. If you see they're getting a bit of fat around the midsection, take a step back. And then you can move the feeding to every 3rd day of insects just to slow them down. It's all about portion control. I really recommend rotating what insect feeder you feed to them so they have a nice round balanced diet. Again, each individual insect has different macro and micronutrient profiles, like very different. Even 2 different cricket species differ in how they assimilate different like beta carotenoids. So just make sure you're mixing and changing your insect species. Don't just feed crickets only or just mealworms. That's not the way to raise a healthy bearded dragon. So let's go on about greens a little bit. So varying the greens, like I said, just like varying the insects, will lead you to have a very healthy bearded dragon. I really recommend a nice varied balanced diet. Now there's many feeding charts out there, but here's a few things that you can feed them. Lamb's lettuce, romaine lettuce, endive, spring greens, watercress, kale, dandelions, rocket, plantain, sow thistle, bittercress, clover, dead nettle, globe artichoke, sage, and even snapdragon. And then even above all of that, you can go out and you can forage vegetation yourself. And I've done a whole video guide on this channel on how to do that. A really good way to get like baby bearded dragons starting on eating veg is to buy the little plastic trays of like cress, of the little fresh shoots, and spray that as well. Give it a little bit of a spray. And that sort of really encourages bearded dragons to kind of like pick at that, and baby bearded dragons tend to do really well and get started on that way. Don't feed them fruit. There's no need to feed them fruit. They don't eat fruit in the wild. It doesn't exist for them in the wild. It only causes like stomach bloating and dental issues. So I just want to go into a little bit what happens into like pet shops and why you might find that you might struggle to get a baby to eat its veg. So in pet shops, obviously we have a clutch hatch out, and normally they all go into the same vivarium. And because you have these lizards that aren't actually social and they're actually solitary and would disperse naturally in the wild in this confined space together, you get a little bit of competition going on. And if you don't feed them a lot of food, you can find that they have like nipped toes and nipped tails and a little bit of like infighting and like injuries are happening. So when you're trying to sell a baby bearded dragon, you don't want a baby bearded dragon with like feet missing or the tips of tails missing. So the way that shops combat that is to overfeed and oversupply food so that they're always sated and they're not actually going after each other in that way. And even if a shop does supply vegetation, the pure abundance of bugs and the nice tasty treat over their salad, they will always choose that treat. It's like a child. It's like saying to kids, do you want your broccoli or do you want your candy bar? They're going to go for the candy bar. So when they're raised in that way where it's like candy bar, candy bar, candy bar to try and placate their behaviour, when they come to you with like little desire to eat their veg, that's when people get stuck with a bearded dragon that is stuck eating the bugs. What I recommend to do is, if your baby bearded dragon won't eat its veg, don't feed it bugs. Just don't feed it bugs. Just obviously feed it its veg and make sure food is available. And over the course of like a week or 2 weeks of not eating bugs, eventually they cave in and they eat their veg. They're not going to starve. They're far more intelligent than that. Bearded dragons even dream. It's been shown in studies. So these are intelligent, sentient animals. So they're not going to allow themselves to starve. They're just being little buggers. So eventually they will go, okay, I'll eat my veg. And that's how you end up with a bearded dragon that actually loves its veg. Like mine. Right, let's move on to supplements. So calcium is the main one that people think of. Calcium is needed for healthy bone growth, especially in a growing animal. But also for neurons and muscle fibers to even contract. It's really healthy for brain activity. Just overall, calcium is really important for their bodies. So most vertebrate animals, that's animals with a backbone, need twice as much calcium in their diet as there is phosphorus. Phosphorus is obviously really important as well, but at the right levels. So naturally they want to have twice as much calcium than phosphorus in their blood, and they need to maintain that. Otherwise, if it dips, then they need to maintain that homeostasis in the blood to maintain proper bodily order. So what they do is they withdraw calcium from their bone storage to bring it back out into the blood to maintain those levels. And that is a really clever, really good short-term survival strategy. But however, in captivity, when that's prolonged and people aren't providing the right calcium, they continue to draw and draw and draw and draw until eventually the bones become really weak and brittle. And that's where you get like hairline fractures or bones become bendy and like really like rubbery. And then you get to a disease called metabolic bone disease, which essentially you see misshapen bones in joints and limbs. You can look on the internet and see a picture of a metabolic bone disease bearded dragon. It isn't nice to look at. So our feeder insects don't have skeletons, so naturally they don't store calcium. They have an exoskeleton. And funny enough, that exoskeleton is really high in phosphorus. So if we feed bearded dragons just those bugs, they're not getting the calcium they need. So what we do is we put calcium powder on our bugs to make sure that when they eat the bugs, they're getting a higher than 2-to-1 ratio of calcium to phosphorus in their overall diet. And again, you think like, well, who's dusting their bugs in the wild? Well, the reason that it doesn't happen in the wild and they don't get metabolic bone disease is because they're eating plants in the wild that have 20 times as much calcium than phosphorus in them. So overall in their diet, they're getting more calcium than phosphorus. And obviously the bugs in the wild are eating those same vegetation as well. So it's in captivity when we're in total control that things might go wrong unless we know what we're doing. So what we want to do is just make sure that every time we feed a bug to our bearded dragon is just to coat it in some calcium powder. Where things really go wrong in captivity, where people are like ploughing loads of bugs into their bearded dragon, obviously they're ploughing loads of phosphorus into their bearded dragon, and their bearded dragon's growing fast because of all the protein they're getting. So not only do they have like a mass amount of phosphorus going into them, but also they're growing fast and their bones are growing fast. The whole thing just means that their calcium requirements might go from 2-to-1 to 5-to-1 to 7-to-1 to 10-to-1, and it gets ridiculous. And because people are feeding so much food and bugs to their bearded dragon, you get to the point where you literally can't shovel enough calcium into them fast enough. So that's why it's really important that this coincides with the low feeding regimen and just grow them slowly and healthy. Okay, so we talked about calcium powder, but let's talk about multivitamins. Now, in terms of other vitamins and minerals, your bearded dragon should get what it needs from a well-rounded, healthy, balanced diet of cycling vegetation and cycling insect species. So what we want to do is use a multivitamin powder to come through and just fill in any gaps and make sure that our bearded dragons are nice and healthy. Multivitamin powders are synthetic and actually quite strong, so we don't want to use them too frequently. With vitamins, you either have fat-soluble vitamins or water-soluble vitamins. If it's water-soluble, it just basically gets excreted. In mammals like us, when we urinate, we just release excess of these water-soluble vitamins. But if it's fat-soluble, it gets stored in our adipose tissue are fat, so there is a risk of overdosing on fat-soluble vitamins, and that's why it's important we're not feeding this multivitamin every single day to our bearded dragon. All you want to do is just put some multivitamin powder and coat their bugs once every 2 weeks in the same way that you would your calcium. So supplementation is actually quite simple. Calcium every time you feed bugs, and then once every 2 weeks just use the multivitamin powder in the same way that you would use the calcium that day. I could simplify it as much as that for you. Now, I won't cover brumation in this video because I don't take any position on whether a baby bearded dragon should brumate or not. But if you want to research into that when it gets larger, or you're looking to see what they're going to be doing, you can look at the full bearded dragon brumation guide on this channel, and that will really help you as well. I'm putting so many videos on this channel to help build like a really nice foundation for people to learn from and grow and get their bearded dragon care down. So don't just watch this one video, always do your research. I have plenty of other resources. There's plenty of other guides coming, and if you want to see more guides that haven't been produced yet, make sure you subscribe to this channel to stay up to date, and I'll see you in another video.